welcome to the Gregory and Paul Show.
Hey everyone, Paul.
And on this show, we break down the latest in startups, SaaS, AI, and whatever the internet has been debating this week. We always aim for smart takes, but hey, we end up with many, many dumb ones. I'd like to think we'll hit on a few scorchers. And of course, we love memes way too much.
That's right. We're streaming live on X and LinkedIn every Friday at noon. Then we post straight this onto YouTube. Someday we'll get this on the podcast platforms as well. I think the plan is that we'll do that after we record around 5 episodes. Then we'll launch on Apple, Spotify, and Google.
Yeah, I don't think Apple lets you just upload one, does it?
No, we'll have to self-host.
No. Yeah, exactly. And so we have a guest, Chetan Nandakumar. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. He's a technologist, entrepreneur, educator with deep expertise in computer vision, AI coordination, and decentralized systems. A UC Berkeley graduate earned his PhD studying the human visual cortex and how the world used those insights, or he uses those insights to build smart computer vision tools during your time in academia. True? Did I get that one right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let me keep going. So, Berkeley, you've co-founded Modista, an AI-powered platform for enhanced online apparel discovery through computer vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then you took over leadership of VP of products at Gensyn, building decentralized machine learning networks. And you're now CEO and founder of Fluora, where you're also developing the monetized MCP protocol, which will bring programmable payments to MCP servers, fueling the AI agentic ecosystem.
Correct. Thank you, Gregory.
Yeah, I had to do a lot of research for that one. I was like, wow, this is quite interesting. And then, of course, Paul here is a huge fan of MCP servers. And so maybe we even just like kick this off and have a conversation about MCP servers and what they are and what they mean for the agentic ecosystem. Let's just start with a definition for people who are maybe as familiar with it as we are.
Yeah, should one of us talk through what MCP server is? I feel like, Chen, you should.
Sure, yeah, I can just give a brief intro to folks who are new to it. So essentially, I'll say a few things. One is MCP is a way to, the way it was sort of brought about was that folks at Anthropic realized that Claude was trained on internet data, but didn't know anything about your data. So all the data that is in your, let's say in your hard disk or in your databases or in your SaaS services. So MCP was essentially kind of the original idea was to be kind of connectors. It was a protocol that allowed an LLM to be connected to data sources locally or on the internet. And what's going to evolve to is kind of a sort of an AI-friendly API that essentially allows a service to interact or be interacted with by an LLM or an AI. So there's a bunch of really cool things that can happen when this integration is possible. So your LLM can, let's say, go through all your data, make sense of it, and then write emails for you, right? Because if you have a Gmail integration and a database integration, so there's all these, this kind of simple sort of protocol unlocks all within the AI space. So MCP is almost turning into like the HTTP of AI.
It's a really good way of putting it. Do you think? So continue on the question. Do you feel like MCP will become the default way for agents to interact with our data?
I think so. There's a few different protocols out there. I think we definitely need a new protocol. Yeah. So the protocols that we currently have were not built for agents, and there's a lot of nuance and things that we have to sort of that require something new. Right now, MCP is really kind of had such a head start and has so much adoption that I think likely it'll win out. There's a few others, A2A by Google. There's another one, I think ACP by IBM. There's a few other ones that are out there, but my guess is that given how much of a head start MCP currently has, and how much adoption it has, it'll probably be the one that wins out.
Yeah, totally. I jumped onto this AI trend about 1.5 years ago, and a few companies has tried to use AIs to automate some tasks on the browser, or OpenAI has the browser mode. It just never really made sense to me. Right? We're trying to like shoehorn this super intelligence, this AI, to interface with the traditional way that humans operate, which is like mouse and keyboard through the browser, and really where they could just completely plug into our data, and then we can just interact with them in a much more natural way, and just interact and just ask them questions. When I first started using MPC servers, I gave it access to one of my databases, and it was just like a light bulb moment for me. It turned on. Right? Instead of writing SQL queries, instead of writing document queries against my Elasticsearch server, it just all I had to do was just ask it questions, and it gave me the answers. It was wild. It was crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really unlocks a whole lot. And in my history with it, I was actually a director of products at Near last year, and was very much seeing this fragmentation in the AI space, and really felt like there was a need for a protocol. So I started to work on a protocol. This is prior to MCP. And so we were exploring how a protocol could work and look, because we felt that, I really felt that once we could have that basic layer to unlock so much new functionality, just like HTTP, when that came out, it unlocked all this whole new world of possibility and applications. And so we were working on something there, and then in the midst of that, so we started kind of in September or so, and then in the end of November, MCP came out, and so that's really taken off. And so now, in what I'm currently doing with Fluora, is seeing, because MCP, kind of was something that was meant to kind of solve a real, need with data and interacting, but it wasn't. And now, as we see it sort of really take over the industry, there was a real need to add monetization in the mix. And monetization wasn't a part of the MCP spec, and it's not really on the roadmap even for the next year. And so, so we wanted to see if we could really make that happen in a way that didn't require any changes to the core MCP spec. And we found a way to actually do that, and we're very excited.
Wow.
This can unlock a whole new set of functionality in the space.
Yeah. Okay. Can you reveal a little bit more? Because I'm very excited to know a little bit more about that. So tell me if I'm off. The three things that I think is coming on through MCP is monetization, like you said, maybe some kind of authentication or authorization so that you can authenticate who's accessing these MCP servers.
Yeah.
And then maybe the lastly is collaboration, right? Like MCP servers are on your cloud instance is still a very single player game. If we can open that up to collaborations between people or team members, that would be huge.
Exactly. So that's kind of what we're sort of building at Fluora. So I'll share a little bit about Monetized MCP, which is this open source repo that we're releasing, and then I'll share a little bit about Fluora, which is a marketplace that we're building. So essentially, Monetized MCP is an open source project. Anyone can check it out right now, monetizedmcp.org. And what it is that, so the basic model is that your MCP host will have a digital wallet. And then you have a monetized MCP server. This is a regular MCP server, and we just have some libraries that allow that MCP server to essentially receive payments. And then, so that's step one. Step two is that monetized MCP servers have three standardized tools. One is price listing, which is like a menu. The second tool would be payment methods. Say, oh, here's how I can get paid. And the third is make purchase, right? So it's very similar to how a human would check out at like a store, say, here's the item I want to purchase, here's my payment method, and so forth, right? So the way it works is that the host would first call price listing, say, what are you selling? And the MCP server would respond with a list of, services and prices. Then the host would request, well, what are your payment methods? and the host would reply, or the server would reply with their wallet addresses, let's say. And then thirdly, the host would say, okay, I want to make a purchase. Here's the item and here's the payment. And the server would then be able to process that payment and reply with the service. So it's very, very simple. It works currently with a lot of the standard tech and the current MCP kind of structure. Yeah, it works. So we have it's working tech right now, and you're able to even go right now. We have a private beta, and we have some partners where people can, and so folks can essentially pay for services directly from Claude, can shop and pay for services, which is super cool. I just wanted to pause. I want to share a little bit about our marketplace, but just wanted to pause it in case there's any questions about monetized MCP and how that works.
Yeah, let me see if I can. So for people that maybe aren't as technical and following,
Right.
yeah, because like Paul came and he's like, oh, it's the future, and I was like, what? And then it wasn't until I got the desktop version of Claude and then set it up with my email and set up on my calendar and integrate all that stuff that I saw what you meant, and then it became very obvious to me how this was perhaps going to replace, let's call it like what the people think of as the web or the internet, right? Which is powered by HTTP. So when you start to log into these tools like a ChatGPT or a Claude, and you start asking it questions, it can actually right now go into your email or go into your calendar, and you can like ask questions and it'll come back with answers, right? So you can see how a whole new way of using the internet will emerge, where you're like chatting with these bots and then you're giving them like rather vague instructions, right? You're saying like, find me a bunch of hotels in Portland for my trip next week on July 4th, right? And it's just going to go out there and do a whole bunch of things. You could conceivably give it parameters around like making the purchase for you. And that's why you need some kind of protocol like what you're working on, because right now there's not like or there wasn't until you developed this, a way for these agents to make purchases on your behalf, right? So you can see where this whole new way of using the internet emerges. And like, maybe there's even a point where web browsers are that, like, I don't know if it goes away, but it changes significantly. And maybe most people don't spend a lot of time on the web, which you could even argue is how a lot of people use the internet today. So like people that are not like us, who spend all day in front of a computer, they like walk around, they do things, they use their phone and they log into like WhatsApp and they go into Facebook, and they're not really using the web, right? So if you log into an app in the future that maybe Sam Altman creates at some kind of headphone, and you talk to it and it's going on the internet and doing things and coming back, you can see like an entirely new like protocol and way for all that to function is necessary. So I guess like what I'd like to hear.
Well, hold on, so go
ahead.
On that point. So I think that, just kind of zooming out a little bit and kind of understand what's kind of going on is just that essentially, I think that we're seeing a new actor come to the internet, which is this thing called an AI agent. So before it was just humans, and now we have something new. And this is kind of a transition to kind of like the mid 90s, when you basically had every business had to have a website. Remember back in the day, that was a new thing because it was a new way that folks were sort of interacting, was using the internet. So they needed to have a presence. So now the next, step is that now agents are coming online. And as Paul was saying, for an agent to click through a website's designed for a human. So why all that wasted? It's just not an efficient sort of interface for an agent. So an MCP server is sort of like an agent native way to interact with a business or a resource. And so, just like businesses had to build a website back in the 90s, in 2025, I think every business will need to have an MCP server. And that'll be like the thing, because you want to be available to agents. And I think this is going to be a whole new kind of internet that emerges, where agents are actors and businesses are going to be, or people are going to have to, or going to need to develop interfaces so those agents can efficiently interact.
Yeah. So explain then how, so I get that piece. I think everyone understands that, right? Like website, now everyone needs an agent. Explain how the marketplace part works.
Sure. So the basic idea is that, so we're sort of building for the future, right? We're sort of building for this idea that we are going to be, that agents are going to be taking over, and that's an assumption, and that businesses will need to, cater to that, and people have to cater to that in a variety of ways, and be a whole new set of infrastructure that emerges, which allows these agents to do stuff. There's been a term that one of the YC people came up with recently called B2A, which is business to agents, which is going to be a whole new world. So that's sort of our world, is how we're thinking about things. And so what we're building is essentially a marketplace where, businesses that essentially want to be agent accessible can essentially do so. So first is this open source thing called Monetized MCP. So they can build this Monetized MCP server, and then they can list with us. So think of us like a Google, we're a list of links in the beginning, where people can essentially list their Monetized MCP server. So that's kind of step one. That's this marketplace. So any agent, that can be Claude, it could be ChatGPT, it could be LangChain agents, which are kind of cloud-based agents. Any of them could basically very easily interface with our marketplace to find a resource and to purchase it. And then the very last thing I'll say is that in the future, though, our real vision is to do multi-agent coordination. Now, what happens when these agents, it's not just you shopping for an agent, but these agents can now coordinate and collaborate in all these new exciting ways. And we think that that's a very exciting sort of future to sort of aspire to, where agents are able to collaborate. So
I'm so excited about this. The best way that I can think about this is like you're building the Upwork for agents, right?
Yeah,
any kind of
for agents, yeah.
So like, people go on Upwork or Fiverr to hire somebody with expertise to do something. You could literally do the exact same thing. Let's say in a couple of years, you'll just be hiring agents to do all of this for you.
That's right. And then you can even have an agent that hires those agents, right? So imagine you go to your...
Yeah, correct.
Right. So as an example, like, if you look at ChatGPT right now, you can ask it to write you an essay and it just happens. And that's a pretty magical thing compared to a few years ago. In a few years from now, I think you'll be able to go to ChatGPT and say, hey, launch a coffee shop for me. And it'll be able to interact with a bunch of agents and just make that happen.
Right. Yeah. I think go
ahead.
I think people are starting to realize how to use agents properly. I think we are slowly shifting away from instruction-based interface with AI into like goal-oriented. Mm-hmm. With that, when that shift happens, then this whole thing unlocks.
Yeah.
Great.
I had something in my eye there. Okay. There's a lot of people working in this space. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about like B2B versus B2C. So I've seen some B2B agent platforms. And so that use case, I think, is one that I'd love you guys to expand more upon. And then, of course, like the B2C one, like I'd love to hear like a really straightforward one that like the above average listener of our live stream would get excited about, right? So let's start with the B2B side. Because I think, Paul, you've been talking a lot about how you think agents are going to transform, like your example of like writing SQL queries and now agents can do it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so I guess my question is like, do you think that eliminates the need for SQL? Does it like reduce?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So like adding on to previously what I said, right? So this writing SQL query is literally the intermediate step of you telling the machine, giving a machine instruction to get to your end goal. So like with the agent in the middle, you can literally just tell you what your end goals are, as in like, hey, can you improve my company's top line revenue by 10% next quarter? Right. And then the agent itself should be able to write SQL queries to figure out all of the information and also even just run experiments to improve your business model. So like the currently we're in the step of just trying to figure out what are some of the capabilities that we can do. And MCP is just another way for you to tap into that.
What does it do when it gets to a point where it can't perform a task? So like in your example of the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Like there's obvious things that it can do, right? That are like, let's say, even in my mind, they're digital based. But then there's things like it has to like literally get, I don't know, find the space and get the stuff into the shop.
Well, there's things like where you could, hire people to do it. So the AI could actually contract, imagine like Thumbtack or those services where you actually hire real people.
Yeah.
Even a construction firm, let's say, which is connected to have an MCP server, and then that AI agent can coordinate like an assistant would essentially do that.
I mean, like if you give it access to a credit card, like the real question is like, what can I buy?
Funny.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole monetized MCP angle here, right? Is that
correct?
Giving to make purchases. All right. The other thing that I'm excited about, or I want to hear more about too, is like marketing. Like, how do these agents market themselves? Like, what happens when the marketplace becomes more competitive? Right. Like a lot of these. How do you guys envision that happening?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think
one.
that it's important to kind of step back and think about how are agents different than humans, right? Because if they're going to be the sort of intermediaries, how do we think about them? And humans are a mixture of a lot of things, but AI agents are what we design them to be, like purely, right? So if we want them to be purely rational, which is what they are for the most part, they will be purely rational beings, and they're not going to get swayed. Like if you show a human, if they're on a drive somewhere and they see a billboard, they're not intending to see it, but they can be influenced in a way by seeing that billboard. But AI agents aren't quite like that, right? So if you tell them to do X, they're not going to get distracted by Y at all. And so unless you make that as a parameter, which you basically say, I want you to be open to actually new opportunities or new things that could be useful for me, right? So I think it's a whole different game with agents. And there's a few things that I think are important to note. I think one is that we'll probably see a shift away from, because I think a lot of marketing works on human sort of kind of bugs in our human programming around stuff. And you won't have that with agents, which means that essentially I think there'll be a shift towards the way you market is to just have a better product, right? Like for instance, I'll give you an example. So if you have an AI agent look for a tool for you, right? If it's just an agent, it's going to go look and it's going to find the best tool for you. It's not going to be swayed by cool copy or the fact that LeBron James is endorsing it. It's going to really just get into the details because everyone just wants the best product. No one actually cares that LeBron James is endorsing XYZ product unless it's, something that where the status is important. But for a lot of just normal things, you just want something that works, right? And so the agent will be able to like just go down and get the best product. So the best marketing is going to shift to just building fantastic products and getting people to leave you good reviews. That being said, I think there will be a space for marketing. Exactly how that shows up, I don't know, but I think there will be a way to market in this new world as well.
Yeah,
fascinating.
I got it. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
I actually got a take on this. Is I think humans will become more and more become capital allocators. So essentially, we hold the decision factor on where we spend our attention or capital or money. So like individually, the agents will make the individual decisions, but the marketing will essentially be marketed to the human to say, hey, if you invest the X amounts of attention and time in the next little while, you get this outcome. We still have to make these kind of decisions. And plus, agents right now, by far, after, let's say, 10 iteration, we still don't know, and we still cannot predict the outcome. So as like agents and tasks gets more complicated, I think there is still lots of room for error. So the question really asking ourselves is like, can localized maximum add together to become the optimal outcome with each agent tasks?
Yeah, as it gets more complicated, it'd be harder to execute on. I guess the first thing I thought of too is like, if it's a commodity, they're sold on the marketing, right? So like, I don't know, like, yeah, like maybe we'll go back to the coffee shop. Like, let's say I got this agent shopping for coffee and I want to find a coffee shop. And so some of the parameters are pretty soft, right? Like find a cool location. I want one that like looks cool, or that is like, beyond like, oh, it's in with walking distance and has a good price, right?
Yeah,
that's pretty. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I think it's just anyone's guess right now about what's going to happen. it's just so up in the air, which is exciting for me. I like this type of stuff.
Yeah, I think. I mean, so I guess like the best way to think of it is like look back at how the internet began, right? Like, and I think your analogy, the whole HTTP MCP worked really well. I remember in the beginning, like just having a website was like the advantage, right? There were people that like didn't have one, and it took certain industries and certain companies a long time to get onto the internet, right? So to some degree, that'll be a filter right away, right? There won't be that much content or services or people building MCP servers. And so you'll have like a small group of early adopters where it works really well for. But then it'll change as like more emerges, and there'll be more like the marketplace aspect will emerge as it gets bigger, right? Because people start competing for different parts of the pie, where in the beginning there wasn't that big of a business anyway. So like I owned the MCP coffee shop ecosystem at the moment, right? But that'll get much larger, and it'll create different dynamics. And like I personally think like very new methodologies to like marketing will emerge that are I think hard to understand, but the best way the best model I have to think about it is like Google search keywords. They're pretty straightforward in terms of how they work. Like there's not a lot of psychology to it, right? Like, people are searching for this number of, we know what the volume of searches is. We know what the keywords are. We know what the pricing is. It's got a lot of elements to it that are fairly straightforward. And it doesn't have a lot of the more softer aspects of marketing like television advertising does, right?
Right. If you look at the history of things, I think things are moving towards less middlemen and more towards value, right? So if you look at about advertising back in the 80s and 90s, advertising essentially was like television, magazines, billboards. It was all like it was really hard. I can imagine it must have been impossible to break in as a small company. You would need huge budgets to be able to even get people to know about you. It must have been a nightmare, right? So what we have now is a huge step forward to what we had at the time. And I think that it's going to get better for companies in the future in the AI world, is my sense. And I feel, and it's going to move towards consumer value more and more, right? Where consumers have better products and have more transparency than we did in the past.
Yeah, I love that. Should we move on to some things we have in our
Let's do
docket
it.
for today?
Yep.
All right. Let's do this first one. The multiplayer mode in Claude. Chetan, did you see this announcement?
I saw it briefly, but I didn't go into it.
Paul, this is the one that you're excited about. So why don't you?
Yeah, I think it
explain
adds
this one.
to the one of the 3 wish lists that I have for basically everything that we're building right now is just multiplayer. Multiplayer, I think, will open up so many more possibilities on how.
Oh, maybe just like explain exactly what it is, right? So
Sure.
yeah, you have it. So
so really, it's just this company has made a Claude, but essentially enabled a way for people to collaborate on a conversation together.
So multiple people can be there and prompting at the same time.
Right. I see the results together instead of you having to start a conversation, take a break, share the link with somebody else. They have to resume the conversation on their own end, and it's not a seamless transition. I just think it's really cool. I like how the industry is moving towards this. Even with MCP servers, conversations, it could be now shared. The context could be shared across many people.
That's cool. I have a friend who created something called complex chaos, I believe, that is kind of around that principle. And they've kind of created an enterprise solution which allows people to collaborate using AI as an assistant.
Yeah, this seems like an obvious, like, internal B2B use case where you're on a team and you're even like on a discussion or a call like this, right? And it's like, hey, let's all jump into this AI chat and we can all interact with AI and have like a single coherent discussion, right? Rather than like what we're doing now, someone's like maybe does a prompt and you can kind of send the link to somebody. There's some kind of ways you can hack it, but you can't really have like a group chat. Yeah, I thought this was cool. it seems obvious in hindsight, right? That like that this would be something that all of the chat applications would enable. So I mean, I expect everyone to have it at some point.
Exactly. There's really no reason not to have this.
Yeah. All right. So that's cool. What do we have that's next?
Yeah.
Oh, this is the Reddit
so
one?
I'm a big Reddit guy. I'm on Reddit all the time, and I've seen the evolution of Reddit for a while. So Sam Altman owns about 10% of Reddit. So everything that he is pushing.
Oh, he's a shareholder.
He's a major
Reddit
shareholder of Reddit. So he also owns a company called World. World is this weird, like a decentralized cryptocurrency company who's building a social network. People can join. Parts of its user verification is iris scanner. So it basically is asking all of its users in order for it to prove that they're human, they have to go to one of these like dozens of locations across the world and scan their irises. And Reddit is allegedly in talks of partnering with World ID to enable user verification by,
Yeah, I'm laughing. You can see how the media frame this, right? So creepy World ID. Yeah, they clearly did not like this concept. I don't know, Chetan, have you looked into this World ID stuff at all?
It's something that I think about a bit. I think that identification is going to be really important for the future agentic internet. So I've thought about it quite a bit. And in terms of this, I think it's an interesting take. I don't know how necessary it is, to be honest. I think that there does have to be some proof of humanity, but there's many other ways to do it. There's other platforms where you basically have a way to basically upload your passport or your driver's license and then use that to sort of make sure that you're a real person. I don't fully understand why you need an orb and an iris scan to be able to do that.
And then there's a cryptocurrency connected to it. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. I mean, I can see a future where there's so many agents that there is some need to differentiate between like a real person and agent. But like you said, there's other ways to do it, whether this is the right way to do it. Clearly, what as this goes, Gizmodo thinks it's not, right? That was funny about this article is they clearly were like not a fan of this.
It also feels like disingenuous, right? Like if agents AI gets so good, like does it matter really? Like why should it matter?
I think it would matter legally. That's how I see it being important,
right?
And maybe like this article doesn't really go into that, but like if you post something online, like if there's a person behind it, it's a legally binding thing, right? Depending on what you do and depending on the country you're in. So like if an agent does it and you do it, I guess this goes back to the whole thing about self-driving cars, right? Like who's responsible? What happens in some scenario where there's like an accident or there's a death, right? Like once you start removing the human element from these things, it really changes some ways that, at least the way we've thought about our legal system in the past, right?
Right. I see where you're going with this.
So yeah, for me, like, I think it'll be important, right? Like who's posting what, and there will be people who want to know. And those people will probably be like courts and lawyers. Like I see that being like important, and how it exactly plays out. Like I don't really know. I mean, like maybe at some point you'll be required to have this thing, and that's always been a really resisted type of thing in the United States. Like even a social security number, there's a lot of people who don't want it to be like an identification number, but it might be something that becomes necessary. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it may happen more ground up, right? So imagine if it's not from the top down, if you're requiring everyone to do anything, but instead if I'm a business, let's say, and I say, hey, in order to interact with me, I want to know who I'm interacting with. Some businesses may not elect for that. Other businesses may elect for that, right? So you can imagine that if there's a groundswell, even if I might have an agent, and I may say that other people can interact with my agent, but I want to know who you are before I share information with you, right? And so if enough people begin to have that as a requirement, that they will only interact with someone who they can ID, or an agent that they can ID for security reasons, then it could turn into a de facto sort of kind of
standard or Yeah, I mean, I think the way you describe it is how it generally works. The US is like enough people get on board and we decide this is the like standard because it just wins out in the marketplace. But in like Europe or other places, they do mandate these things more than we do, right? So mobile is a good example where they have like the GSM standard. Here we have a couple of standards, we have other standards. But it does seem inevitable that some way to verify people, are you human, will be required.
Are you human or are you someone? Or even
Yeah.
like it could be other types of things. Like imagine if you are a government sort of site and you want to,
Mm.
you only want folks to interact with you, like let's say file permits or something, if they actually live in your jurisdiction, right? And so you want to know if this person living here or is it some rando, you know? You want to be able to make those assessments. What's interesting about the crypto world, so I spent a lot of time there, is that there's a whole world of ZK, which
Yeah.
is zero knowledge, which essentially means that you can essentially share that. Let's say, like, give another example. Suppose you want to like buy liquor, right? You want to know that the person is over 21. You don't need to know how old they are. All you need to know is, are they over 21 or not? So with ZK, you can essentially share the necessary piece of information, i.e. over 21 or not, without sharing the actual age. So you can reduce the privacy issues and just share what's absolutely necessary. Or in the case of like location-based stuff, you can say, is this person living in my jurisdiction, without knowing their exact address, right? And so that's really been crafted in the crypto world, and it works pretty well. And so I think it offers a lot in the AI world, where an AI agent can be, have a ZK identity, and so in that way can represent you without, spilling all of your identifying information.
Wasn't this like why we have all those, internet ID extensions? Wasn't that the original idea? Like, because they're beyond.com, right? You have .org and .net, and there's other ones that I don't even remember actually. Wasn't that the idea? Like, there's .edu, right? So similar type of like, at least conceptually, I think that's what they were trying to solve for.
You mean
But
extensions?
for
You
whatever
mean like
reason,
.org and you mean like domain extensions?
yeah, and website domain names, yeah.
I think that's kind of a different thing. I think that's just the category of who you are. Are you an organization? Are you educational? Or are you commercial? But I guess what I'm speaking about is more identity for the individual.
Well, I guess I was coming from, you're saying like, hey, we're trying to figure out like, are you a government organization? Are you this? And I thought that
I would
that's
say on the other
what,
side,
so I
more
guess I
the
would say
human,
that,
right? It wasn't the human
yeah.
asking the
Oh, I
organization.
see.
The organization asking the human, do you live in my jurisdiction? Are you over 21 or not? If I'm selling liquor, for instance.
Yeah, I guess I was under the impression that, or I guess I would say that domain names they were intended to do something similar, but they never worked. Like everyone just kind of adopted .com, and there's no like legal reason that you have to get any of them, right? You could just do whatever you want. Like they're kind of like a vanity thing, but they could have been, or there could have been like parameters around them or like functionality around them, which is what you're talking about. I love the idea of like the ZK.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
It makes it really,
Yeah, and I think
really
it works for
easy.
individuals
I
and
think,
organizations. So you could have, you want to know that, some organs who they actually say they are. It's a big sort of question. So, yeah.
yeah. All right. Do you want to do this next one, Paul?
Yeah,
This is
for
the
sure.
Google X
So
spin out.
I am absolutely a sucker for nerdy news / rumors / legal battles. It's just my way of getting my dose of cheap news. So with this one, Google X allegedly spun out IYO, which supposedly made smart earbuds around 2018. They're now suing Sam Altman / OpenAI at their collaboration with Johnny Ive to allegedly that they copied this entire thing, and also told them that they were not originally not interested in any of the ideas. However, uh, however, they allegedly went so far as getting the blueprints and all of the details of this object, of this invention, went away and now copied it completely. So could turn out to be nothing, but it's interesting. What do you think?
I read the comments. I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, Chetan, but I read the comments. Like they run the gamut from people who are like super offended. I mean, it's even framed as like most dramatic, must-read tech lawsuit of the year to people who are like, this is a total nothing burger. I don't know. I had to read it like 4 times to even understand like exactly what they were accusing them of. And so there is another way to spin it that it's nothing, that like, sure, the idea for like an AI powered earpiece is quite obvious and people have been talking about it for like a long time. And it's no surprise to me that Johnny Ives was somebody that a lot of people talk to, like, hey, you're the master of making incredibly innovative devices. Have you thought about doing these earpiece AI things, right? So from that perspective, I feel like it's quite obvious that people have been talking about it. I mean, the details of the lawsuit, like, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't totally understand exactly what they're being accused of here. My assumption was like, they violated an NDA or something like that, right? And so the courts will ultimately decide. But I guess like I found this, like, I'm not convinced it's the must-read tech lawsuit of the year. Ajay, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, no, not a whole lot on this particular thing. I think it's, one of those things that happens in the industry. If it's true, it's unfortunate. If it is true, I think that, and at the same time, it gets tricky, as you're saying, that there's, all these ideas are kind of out there as well. So I think the question is, to what degree, if they did have that meeting, to what degree did they, lift, and how much is that out of sync with the NDA if they signed one?
Yeah, that was my take on it, was like, everyone in Silicon Valley talks, and a lot of people like won't sign NDAs because of reasons, for a lot of reasons, right? Because like maybe they're generally it's like, we're working on something similar already. So if we sign this thing and then it turns out that your invention is some of our invention, like, then we have an issue. So there's lots of ways that this could be played out. That's why I was like, I didn't think it was the lawsuit of the century. But I do think it's interesting that at least this concept is something that people have been like talking about, working on a long time. And I think it says something too about like what they're most likely working on, right? Because they haven't really made any formal announcements. Yeah. And so the idea that it's going to be an AI powered earpiece seems like the best candidate now for what they're going to work on.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Any more news items we have in there?
Time to move on.
Okay, we're doing Reddit. Reddit's my favorite segment. So on our Reddit segment, we do all the doom scrolling so that you don't have to, right? And so we found this. This was the one I uncovered this week on my favorite forum, r SaaS. And so this one was 9 brutal truths after my first $1,000 in SaaS. No sugarcoating it. And so, Chetan, you as a founder, I think will appreciate some of these things that this guy wrote. And I pulled this one out because I thought some of them were just excellent. They're really straightforward too. Like, you think marketing is a one-off launch event. I mean, I know that I've seen a lot of founders who have I've had that experience with. Chetan, what do you think about marketing when it comes to
it is definitely not a one-off launch event. It is. I think it's a whole different operating system of how to think, and I think a lot of founders aren't used to it if they haven't been marketers. It's a constant conversation with the public, and it takes time to really, forge that muscle.
Some of these other ones are good too. You have zero real discipline or structure. That one's more of an opinion, or I think it depends on the founder. Time management is completely backwards. That one was interesting. Like, you spend 90% of your time perfecting code and 10% getting customers. I actually think like there's a lot of reasons why this one is something that I do think is actually good advice for founders.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks who are founders don't necessarily come from marketing as much. They come from tech development in some way, and so forming that marketing muscle is a new muscle. So it takes time to really get
that. You're overthinking, analysis paralysis. I've definitely seen that one.
Well, I don't know. I feel like that is true. I've also seen underthinking, where I've been part of teams where they don't really, like, they're so action oriented that they don't actually have a good strategy, and they just are just kind of fumbling in the dark, it seems like. And I think you just need a balance. Of course you need to think, but you don't want to overthink. You don't want to like overdo. You want this balance of strategy and action. That's the way I think about it.
All right, here's another good one I want your perspective on. You're pretending to be bigger than you are.
Well, I think that's a little tricky because the whole industry asks you to be bigger than you are. Like when you go to a VC pitch, you're not getting rewarded for being really matter of fact. You don't start with saying you have zero revenue. You start with saying you want to take over the world. That's what you're bred to do and whatnot. So
that's a really interesting point. Sometimes, and I think you're dead on. Actually, this one's very nuanced, and it depends on a lot of factors. And I was thinking about this the other night because I think you have like an investor narrative. I need to go to them and present that we're going to build this great business, and here's our roadmap to how we're going to become like a public company. But like that isn't the same narrative that you go to market with, and particularly in the early days. If you try to tell everyone like, "Oh, we're going to be a public company," and it's just two guys online, doing webinars and stuff, like that doesn't seem like something you build a public company on. And so, trying to like balance that and have the right narrative for the right situation, I think it's tough for a lot of founders. You just got to switch the context so much that it's hard to do. Yeah, I like that one. And then. You have no clue who your customer actually is. So we've had lots of Reddit threads that we feature on here, and that's one of the ongoing themes is that I think in the early stage, a lot of companies struggle with like trying to figure out like who their customer is, right? And sometimes if you've invented something really innovative and new, it is hard. Like it does take some trial and error, right? I don't have a perspective on that one, Chetan. Some of you and I have talked about actually.
I just think that, thinking about building businesses, I think there's this kind of larger umbrella, which is just the creative process, right? So you look at like an artist. How does an artist make a work of art? And sometimes they have an idea of what they want to create, and sometimes they have no idea, and they just sort of start drawing and they kind of figure it out as they go. And I think the same is true for any sort of creative art, including creating a startup, right? So sometimes you start and you have a really clear idea of the customer and the pain point and all that, and that's awesome. That's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you don't. Like, I think the world is going in this direction. I think I'm gonna, skate to where the puck is. And that I think is also valid. It just really depends on, everyone has a different creative process, and it depends on your industry and the dynamics. So I think there are times when you don't have an idea of the customer, and that's not a bad thing, right? So if you look at the history of the internet, people like PayPal, let's say, which is obviously a huge infrastructure for the internet, they didn't know who their customer was, and they had to figure that out over, a good bit of time. There's many examples where it was kind of unclear in the early days, and they kind of figured it out through iteration and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think these really big tech consumer ones, it's hard to define. Mark Zuckerberg's talked a lot about this, and this post mentions in that section about Facebook that like they serve a lot of different people. It started out as something that was for like colleges, right? Then it was seen as like for all, it was Ivy Leagues and colleges and like young people, and they still have like advertisers and users. Like there's a lot of different elements to the business, and so wrapping your head around like all those different segments, I think is hard. I think your example of PayPal is good, right? There's supply and demand and banks and partners, and then there's users using it and people like buying crazy things on eBay. It's not so obvious to be like, oh, this is who our target audience is.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. What else do we have in here? Oh, we got some great AI marketing first stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
All right.
I love your tagline, by the way.
Yeah, you want me to introduce one? All right. So our AI first marketing segment for us, it's all about the fact that humanity didn't invent machine learning to solve hunger. We built it to get people to click on stuff.
I thought it was really funny.
Jane's like, oh my God.
Well, I would say I have a few more comments about it, because I've been around from
yeah.
And just seeing how it really kind of cracked through. And I'd say that there's actually folks, the reason I got into AI is I just thought it was interesting in terms of like how does the brain work? Our brain is sort of a computer. How does that work? How do we use insights from the brain to actually get computers to do what human brains do? If we could do that, it'd be really interesting. It was almost like a science experiment or a challenge. It was like, can we figure out how the brain works, and can we kind of have a simulation in a computer? And that I just found was such an interesting, like, intellectual challenge. And it like dovetailed into all these interesting topics, which is like, how do current brains work, and how do computers work, and how do you do this thing? And so, and if you look at a lot of the researchers like Geoff Hinton, he was the guy who got the Turing Award. He just got the Nobel Prize for a lot of his seminal work in the space. He was deeply interested in the intellectual challenge of this. I've actually studied with Geoff Hinton from back in the day, and I know his work. And so I was kind of around in that whole AI culture of the sort of academic culture at the time. So he was deeply interested in neuroscience. Neuroscience really inspired a lot of what Geoff Hinton did, and a lot of the AI researchers as well. So I think it was really just sort of like thinking about it as that it should be possible, and trying to like crack the code on it was, I think, the original motivation. And then I think what happens, because we live in a capitalistic world, capitalism sort of seizes everything and kind of refashions everything in its image. So yes, very quickly thereafter, once that was possible, then it turned into like the most efficient way to grow business and to make money.
Yeah, I know it's my cynical, sarcastic perspective. That actually came from like this actually goes back to like when I first arrived in Silicon Valley pretty early on, and I was like, oh, I see the difference I was from New York, so I was like, New York is like optimizing algorithms to do trading, and then California became optimizing algorithms to do advertising. Right? It's basically like the two monster businesses that power both of these industries. I love your more academic and thoughtful way of thinking about it. So I appreciate that. All right. So what is the you included a couple of different imaging tools?
Yeah.
Today,
so
right?
There's two fairly, I would say, the biggest launch of this past week. The first one is this new Higgs field Sol. It's another one of those text to image generators, image to video generators. I am just knocked off by just how good the qualities are getting, right? So you can see in the demo here, from the static image, they're now generating a 2 to 3 second long video that looks completely natural. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember when this whole thing started. It was Will Smith eating that bowl of spaghetti about a year and a half ago. That looked completely crazy to now over here, completely natural. It looks like completely real. If I saw this in person, or if I didn't know this was AI generated, I would have thought she was a real person. So, well done.
I think it looks totally real. I was shocked when you showed me this.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Some more examples down here.
Cannot tell that this is AI. Like if someone showed me this, I would have absolutely no idea that it was.
Yeah, so these things are getting better and better and better every single day. I'm just absolutely wow.
I mean, this stuff is like, I feel like it was only a couple of months ago where they still had, there'd be like weird like dynamics, and like the 3D nature of the world tended to be a little bit odd at times. Like they would kind of move around, and it just didn't form in the same way that a real 3D environment
exactly
looked. Like these are like,
it's really amazing. I think the last like 10% when is actually a huge lift. And so for them to like cross that boundary where it actually looks 100% real is a huge accomplishment. I'm sure there was a lot of details involved in order to get this.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I'm blown away by it. Like I do a lot of AI generated video stuff with Sora. I thought it was like really fun when it came out, and it did a pretty good job. But this stuff is even it's even better.
Yeah, absolutely. So like it's the movement, right? Movement right now is still the bottleneck. So I've seen a couple models that's just focused on sports movements. I think that if we crack that, then everything is opened up.
Yeah, these are pretty simple, right? Like people kind of walking around and just kind of doing things in daily life. Although I will say, like the girl drinking the wine,
Right, the first one,
like the wine in the glass, like looks perfectly accurate. Like it behaves exactly the way I would expect.
And the reflections
and the reflections,
is remarkable.
There's some elements to it that are just like whoa, like and you can see how people could just take these clips and string them together and like animate them, right, and create narratives and stuff.
Correct.
Do you know? I didn't play around this enough, like to understand, and maybe you guys have a perspective on this, like repeatability. That's the piece that I have found difficult with these things. Is like, okay, I want to put this girl in my like film, my narrative. How do I get it to like look like her in every scene? And that's the one that like people are getting better at it, but I don't know how to solve it.
Yeah, I haven't played enough with the tools, but I know that part of it is that even back in the original Midjourney days with just images, you weren't able to really do that. So and a lot of people would appreciate that. I'm sure they're thinking about it. But yeah,
it seems. I mean, yeah, right. It's an obvious need and an obvious challenge. So I'm confident that there's like ways to do it. So I think it'll get solved. And once that gets solved, it's like sky's the limit with this stuff. It's gonna be incredible.
Most recently, maybe a couple months back, I think Runway. So the problem is called character consistency. Runway, I think maybe Gen 4 supposedly solves this problem. So there are companies whose entire focus is on solving this problem. So just pulling up this right now. Yeah. So.
Oh, is it Runway?
Yeah. There are many different models and companies are solving slightly different problems. And these guys, a couple months back, this is probably, in March, end of March, supposedly solves, or it took a bigger step towards that, right? So this kind of opens up to actual AI filmmaking, which is character consistency between scenes.
Yeah, because that's the key, I think, with this stuff for it to like really
for filmmaking
become commercially viable in a way that it's not today, right? It's like I like that, and then how do I do that? Like if I want to use it in my video game, I need to create all these different like characters and scenes and stuff, exactly. And so they have to be the same. It has to be the same person, right?
Nice.
So solving that.
Meme of the week.
Meme of the week. Where we analyze internet culture like it's high art. All right, are we gonna do the Peter Thiel one? Oh my God! So we always like share a meme of the week, and of course
you take the trophy.
I've been making,
week, I believe.
I've been making all these deep fakes with Yapper, which I love. It's been really fun, and I did this this Peter Thiel one. You know, play it. Oh, does the audio work? No. What I'll say with like these deep fakes and what I found to be challenging actually was to get them to sound and speak in the same way that the person speaks. So with Peter, he like stutters and pauses, and I had to spend a lot of time like manually editing it to get him to get it to do that. And if you nail that piece, it sounds just exactly like something they would say. Yapper even like sent them a message and asked him. I was like, hey, that's what would make this stuff perfect. And he's like, it's really hard, and they're aware of it. And he's like, have to do it manually. He was like, yeah, I figured that out. But that'd be my feedback, is like just a way to get the audio piece so it matches like their intonation and stuff. Then these things are like just incredible.
It's so good. You did a great job.
Yeah. Oh my God, super funny. I did use AI to help generate the script too, right? So you can go to it and say like, this is what I want Peter to say, and it does a pretty good job at like conceptually getting you like half of the way there, because he's talking about like bypassing the broadcast cartels, and it's a very Peter type of way to talk about things. But to really get the finely tuned Peter Thiel tone, you got to do a lot of work.
Yeah, well, that's a hats off to you for pulling it off, Gregory. I think that's amazing that you're able to get it to be so realistic.
I know. It was like I was even thinking like maybe we even do Paul and I, maybe we even do a whole show where we talk about some of the stuff that we're doing with like a lot of these tools. We figure out some really interesting techniques, and like, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people have questions and stuff. And like I said earlier, I think we were talking before we started, Peter Thiel was the one where I'm about to post this, and I'm like, he's the one guy who actually would sue us. So like, it didn't get that much traction.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. This is really fun, and I'm excited about it. But yeah, I don't want to get in trouble from Peter Thiel. No way. Are we good? That's a wrap.
I believe so. Well, Jen, really
Awesome.
appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for joining. That was great. I thought we had an excellent conversation about MCP servers, AI, SaaS, founders. We touched on every theme that we always do on our show. So thank you so much, Chetan.
Thank you.
All right.